The afternoon sun filtered through the branches of the trees, casting gentle rays across the park where Max, a golden retriever, lay sprawled on the soft grass. His large amber eyes sparkled with the innocent joy of a dog who had everything he needed: a loyal owner, Sarah, and an endless supply of sticks to fetch. Max wagged his tail, eyes locked on Sarah as she smiled, preparing to throw his favorite stick into the distance. The park was alive with laughter and chatter, the scent of fresh-cut grass in the air, and the sounds of children playing in the distance. It was a typical sunny afternoon, one of those peaceful moments that Max cherished every day. Sarah had brought him here often, not only for the exercise, but for the simple joy of their time together. Max loved these afternoons. With every throw of the stick, he leapt through the air with his usual enthusiasm, his fur glistening in the sunlight, and his heart full of excitement. To him, life was a game of fetch straightforward, fun, and full of rewards. Every time he returned with the stick, Sarah's face would light up with pride, her affection for him evident in the way she petted his head. But today, something felt different. Max, normally so focused on the task at hand, noticed that Sarah's attention seemed to drift. She was scanning the lake that bordered the park, her eyes narrowing as if searching for something. Max stopped mid-run, his ears perked, sensing that something was not quite right. A figure at the edge of the water caught Sarah's eye. It was another dog, a border collie, whose coat was matted and unkempt. The dog looked disoriented and weak, shivering by the water's edge. It was an odd sight in the middle of such a bright, lively day. Max instinctively padded closer to Sarah, his nose twitching as he watched the unfamiliar dog. Sarah, concerned but unsure of what to do, stood still for a moment. Her attention was fully fixed on the dog, who appeared to be struggling with the water's edge. Max's instincts kicked in. He had been trained to follow Sarah's commands, but there was something about the dog's presence that struck him as more urgent. Sarah turned to Max, her voice soft but filled with uncertainty. "Stay, Max," she said, her hand gently pressing him back as she moved closer to the stranger. But before Sarah could act, the border collie, perhaps startled by the sounds of the park, suddenly lost its footing and slipped into the water. The water, which had been calm only moments ago, now became a swirling current, pulling the dog farther away from the shore. Sarah gasped and shouted, "Help, someone help!" Max's heart raced. In a split second, he knew what he had to do. The instinct that had been buried deep inside him surged forward. This was not a game. This was real. Without a second thought, Max bolted toward the water. His paws hit the ground with urgency as he barked to get the dog's attention. But the current was too strong, and the border collie was struggling, barely able to stay afloat. Max didn't hesitate. Without a single thought for his own safety, he dove into the water, his fur immediately soaked by the cold current. He paddled frantically toward the struggling dog, pushing through the thick waves, his body aching from the cold, his limbs working in overdrive to get closer to Daisy, the name Sarah had just called the border collie. "Daisy, hold on," Sarah shouted from the shore. But Max wasn't listening to her voice anymore. All he could hear was the frantic splash of water, the quiet gasps from Daisy, and his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Max managed to reach Daisy, who was now exhausted, sinking deeper into the water. Max, despite his strength and confidence in the water, struggled against the powerful current. With his teeth, he grabbed the scruff of Daisy's fur, pulling her toward the shore. Every muscle in his body screamed with fatigue, but his determination was stronger than his exhaustion. Sarah watched helplessly, her heart in her throat, as Max fought to keep Daisy above water. Time seemed to slow, and for a moment, Sarah feared that she might lose both dogs. The shore seemed impossibly far away, and the strength Max was exerting seemed to be diminishing with every pull he made. But Max didn't stop. He would not let go. As Max struggled against the water, Sarah, frantic, raced to the nearest lifeguard, pleading for help, But the lifeguard was too far, and by the time they could react, Max had already made it halfway toward the shore. The cold wind bit at their skin, but neither Max nor Daisy seemed to notice it. The tension was unbearable as Sarah held her breath, praying with all her heart that Max could pull through. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Max made it to the shore, dragging Daisy behind him. Both dogs collapsed on the grass, their bodies cold and exhausted, but alive. Sarah rushed to them, kneeling down to check on both dogs. Max's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of exhaustion and pride. Daisy, still breathing heavily, looked up at Max with gratitude, her eyes softening in a silent acknowledgement. Sarah held both dogs close, tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't decide whether they were tears of relief or disbelief. Max had done it, against all odds. Max had saved Daisy from drowning. His bravery, instinct, and determination had left everyone in awe, especially Sarah. She knew, in that moment, that Max was not just a dog, he was her hero, and now he had saved another life. As the sounds of the park returned, the spectators who had watched the entire rescue began to gather around, their applause and cheers ringing in the air. But to Max, it didn't matter if anyone else knew. He had done what needed to be done. The quiet, calm day by the lake had turned into something far greater. Max had proven that true bravery is not about size or strength, but about the courage to act when it matters most. The peaceful, sunny day had transformed into a moment of crisis, and the events that followed unfolded so quickly that they seemed almost unreal. Max had always been the obedient, playful dog, content with fetching sticks and basking in the warmth of his bond with Sarah. But today, something had awakened within him that he never knew was there, an instinctual urge to protect, to act, no matter the cost. Max's heart raced as the current of the lake threatened to pull Daisy farther away. Her frantic paddling was no longer enough. Max could hear her weak cries, and the fear in her eyes mirrored his own growing panic. The scene around him blurred into a haze of sound, movement, and urgency. Sarah's voice, pleading for help, was nothing more than a distant echo now. It was as though the world had narrowed to a single point, the need to save Daisy. Max's body surged forward, pushing through the cold, biting water with all his strength. His fur, now heavy and drenched, clung to his skin, and each stroke felt like an eternity. The current fought him, pulling at his limbs, trying to drag him under. But Max wouldn't give in. His determination burned brighter than the cold that gripped his body, stronger than the overwhelming fatigue threatening to overtake him. His instincts guided him. He knew what he had to do. With every muscle in his body working together, he reached Daisy, who was now barely keeping her head above the water. She was exhausted, and the weight of the water seemed to pull her further into the depths. Max reached out, gently nudging her with his nose, trying to guide her back toward the shore. But she couldn't move. She was too weak, too disoriented, and Max realized that he would have to do more than just guide her. He had to pull her. His mouth found her fur, and with a strength he never knew he had. Max clamped down, pulling Daisy's body toward him, toward safety. Her limp form dragged against the water, but Max held on, his claws digging into the muddy lake bed as he fought to keep both of them afloat. From the shore, Sarah watched in horror as Max struggled. His every movement was a fight against the current, against exhaustion, against time itself. She could see his determination in the way he kept fighting, even when it seemed like the water was stronger than him. She shouted for help, but the park was too far from the nearest lifeguard, and no one seemed close enough to assist. Max's own fear spurred him onward. He knew that if he gave up now, Daisy would be lost. He had to get her out. And so, with a surge of adrenaline, Max pulled harder, kicking his legs with the last of his strength, dragging Daisy closer to the shore. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, and the temperature dropped. The wind was growing colder, biting through their fur, but neither Max nor Daisy could stop. Max's chest burned with every stroke, his legs aching as he fought against the current. But he refused to slow down. He couldn't stop. Daisy's life was in his paws. As the distance between them and the shore slowly closed, Max's muscles screamed in protest. His vision blurred, but he didn't look away from Daisy. His grip on her remained firm, and with each passing moment, he felt the shore getting closer. But the current wasn't done with them. It tried to pull them back with every forceful wave. But Max, undeterred, pulled her forward. And then, as if the world had heard his silent plea, Max felt the shore beneath him. His paws finally touched the firm, muddy ground, and he pushed forward with everything he had left, with one last, powerful pull. Max dragged Daisy onto the wet sand, gasping for air, his body trembling with exhaustion. Max collapsed beside her, his body too tired to move any further. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, and his eyes fluttered as he tried to keep himself awake. Daisy, though still shaking, lay next to him, her breaths shallow but steady. Sarah, frantic and tears streaming down her face, rushed to them. She knelt beside Max and Daisy, stroking both their wet fur gently, whispering soothing words. "You did it, Max. You saved her," Sarah said, her voice trembling with emotion. Max, his head heavy on the ground, lifted his eyes to look at Sarah. His body ached all over, but the only thing he could focus on was the feeling of relief flooding through him. Daisy was safe. He had done it. But as he looked at her, something within Max changed. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion or the heroism of the moment. It was something deeper. He had always been just a dog to Sarah, a companion, a playful friend. But in this moment, Max realized that his true worth wasn't just in his loyalty or playfulness. It was in his courage, his willingness to fight and risk everything for someone else, even when there was no guarantee of success. The calm that followed the storm was not just the literal stillness of the lake, but the peace that now settled in Max's heart. He had done something remarkable. He had rescued another dog from certain death, and in doing so, had proven to himself that he was capable of far more than anyone, including himself, had ever imagined. Sarah continued to whisper to both dogs, overwhelmed with love and admiration for Max's bravery. "You're a hero, Max. You really are." Max, still catching his breath, could only wag his tail weakly, his eyes softening with satisfaction. Daisy, now recovering, nuzzled him with her head, as if understanding, in her own way, just how much Max had done for her. As the sunlight faded and the park returned to its usual hum, people began to gather around, drawn by the spectacle of Max's bravery. Some were in awe, others couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. But to Sarah, it didn't matter what they thought. She already knew what Max had done. Max's heroism, quiet and unspoken, had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed it. And while Max may never have been fully aware of the magnitude of his actions, he had proven something that no one, not even the most sophisticated human, could ignore. The heart of a hero can beat in anyone, even in the most unexpected of places. The quiet after the storm was a relief, but the tension in the air still lingered. Max lay beside Daisy, his body sore, his fur still wet and matted from the lake. His breathing was heavy, but there was a sense of accomplishment that filled him, something he had never felt before. He had been called many things in his life: a loyal companion, a playful dog, but never a hero. Yet today, he had saved Daisy from drowning, and something deep inside him told him that this moment would change everything. Sarah crouched next to them, wiping away her tears as she gently stroked both dogs, whispering words of gratitude and love. Daisy, though still trembling, looked up at Max with a silent thank you in her eyes. The connection between the two dogs, forged in the battle for survival, was undeniable. Daisy's gratitude was evident in the way she nudged Max with her nose, as though acknowledging the bravery he had shown. The park was slowly returning to its usual pace. People who had gathered to watch the rescue, witnessing Max's remarkable act of bravery, had started to disperse, some still in awe of what had just happened. The news of the heroic dog spread quickly among the park goers, with whispers and excited chatter about the unbelievable rescue. But amidst the whispers and growing admiration, Sarah couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that there was more to Max's heroism than just the physical act of saving Daisy. She had always known that Max was special, but this was beyond what anyone had imagined. Max had shown courage beyond measure, and his actions had left everyone around him in awe. As Sarah helped Max to his feet, she couldn't help but think about how much he had grown in the last few months. He had always been loyal, playful, and loving, but today, he had proven that he was capable of so much more. Max had become something more than just a dog to Sarah. He had become her protector, her hero. Max, despite his exhaustion, walked slowly beside Sarah, with Daisy following closely behind. The once timid and scared dog was now walking with a newfound confidence, her strength returning as Max's courage had been the catalyst for her survival. There was an unspoken bond between them now, two dogs who had faced the worst together, and together had overcome it. But as they made their way out of the park, Sarah noticed something that stopped her in her tracks. She looked down at Max, who was walking with his usual enthusiasm, but there was a change in the way he carried himself. His tail was high, his steps confident. It was as if he had grown into his new identity, as though he finally understood his own strength. She smiled softly to herself. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Max had always been special, but today, he had shown everyone just how extraordinary he truly was. Later that evening, Sarah received a call from a local news station. Word of Max's heroic act had spread far beyond the park, and they wanted to interview her about the rescue. They were amazed at how a dog could display such bravery, and they were eager to share the story with the public. Sarah was hesitant at first, unsure if she wanted to make Max's actions public, but then she realized that this moment could inspire others. Max, who had always been just a simple dog to the world, was now becoming a symbol of courage. Sarah agreed to the interview, knowing that Max's story could help people see animals in a different light, as beings capable of profound love, loyalty, and heroism. When the camera crew arrived, Sarah and Max stood together, ready to share their story. Max, ever the loyal companion, sat by her side, looking calm and composed. It was as if he understood the weight of the moment. The camera crew began filming, and Sarah told the story of how Max had saved Daisy, his bravery, and how, in that moment, she had seen him as more than just a pet. She spoke about how Max's actions had reminded her of the unspoken bond that existed between humans and animals, and how, sometimes, animals could teach us the greatest lessons in courage. Max, sitting patiently beside her, didn't say a word he didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. The interview was short, but impactful. By the end of it, Sarah could tell that the news station was just as captivated by Max as everyone else had been that day. The story of his courage was now being shared with the world, and people would soon learn that Max wasn't just any dog, he was a hero. As Sarah and Max returned home that evening, the excitement of the day settled into a peaceful silence. Max lay on his bed, exhausted but content, while Daisy curled up beside him, both dogs finally finding a moment of rest after the chaos of the rescue. Sarah sat on the couch, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought about how, just a few hours ago, they had been at the park, unaware that Max was about to become the hero of the day. The news story would air tomorrow, but Sarah already knew that Max had already made his mark in the world, not through the applause or recognition, but through the quiet courage he had shown when it mattered the most. He had saved a life, and in doing so, had reminded everyone of the incredible capacity for bravery and love that animals had. As Sarah sat in the quiet of the evening, she made a silent promise to Max. No matter what came next, she would always be by his side, just as he had always been by hers. The world was now seeing Max for who he truly was: a hero, a protector, and a dog whose bravery had left everyone in awe. The days following Max's heroic rescue of Daisy were filled with a quiet, reflective calm. News of the rescue had spread, and the park where it had occurred became a symbol of bravery. People visited the lake, where Max and Daisy had fought for their lives, snapping photos and telling stories of the courageous dog who had saved another from drowning. The admiration Max received was overwhelming, but despite the attention, he remained the same: playful, loyal, and humble. But while the world celebrated Max's actions, Sarah knew that something had changed. Max was different now, not just in the eyes of the world, but in his own heart. He had done something extraordinary. He had defied the odds and faced danger head-on without hesitation. Max had proven that he was capable of far more than anyone, including himself, had realized. It wasn't just about the rescue anymore. It was about what had awakened inside Max. Something deep within him had stirred during that frantic moment in the water. And now, that something was calling out to be explored further. The bravery he had shown was not just the result of a life-or-death situation. It was an intrinsic part of who Max was. And Sarah could see it now: the quiet strength, the silent courage, the willingness to protect at all costs. But how far could that courage take him? And what more could he do with it? The ultimate test had not yet come. It was looming just ahead, waiting for Max to step up once again. It was a few days after the rescue when the real test presented itself. Max and Sarah were walking through the park when a familiar voice called out from across the path. Sarah looked up to see a man she recognized: a park ranger, someone who had been there the day Max had saved Daisy. He was walking toward them, his face a mix of concern and urgency. "Sarah, Max," the park ranger called as he approached. "We need your help." Sarah tilted her head, confused. "What's going on?" The ranger looked down at Max, who sat beside Sarah, tail wagging. "There's been an emergency," he began, his voice serious. "A child has fallen into the river on the other side of the park. It's a fast-moving current, and we can't get to him in time. We need to act quickly. Max, he's the only one who might be able to help." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The same river where Max had saved Daisy now posed an even greater danger, and this time, there was no time to hesitate. Max's tail stilled, his posture alert as he sensed the gravity of the situation. This wasn't like a game of fetch. This was real. Sarah could see the determination in his eyes. She knew that Max was no longer the playful dog he once was. He had become something more, something that Sarah couldn't quite articulate but knew was there. A force of nature. Without a second thought, Sarah nodded. "Let's go." They ran toward the river, the park ranger leading the way. The sound of rushing water grew louder as they neared the edge, where a crowd of people had gathered. The child, a young boy no older than 7 or 8, was clinging to a rock, his face pale with fear. The current pulled at him, inch by inch, and it was clear that he was running out of time. Sarah's heart raced. Max stood at the riverbank, his body tense, waiting for Sarah's command. But this time, it wasn't a command she could give him. This was his moment. This was his test. The park ranger spoke quickly, his voice filled with urgency. "We can't get in there. The current's too strong for us. We need Max to reach him before it's too late." Sarah looked at Max, her breath catching in her throat. There was no room for fear now. Max had already proved himself once, but this time, it wasn't just about a rescue. It was about saving a life. "Go, Max," Sarah whispered, her voice steady despite the fear swelling in her chest. Max didn't need another word. He was already in motion, racing toward the water with the speed and agility that only a dog like him could possess. He didn't hesitate, didn't second-guess himself. The boy's life was in danger, and Max knew what needed to be done. The water splashed around him as he bounded into the river, his paws cutting through the current with all the strength he could muster. Sarah watched, her heart in her throat, as Max swam toward the boy with focused determination. The child's eyes were wide with panic, but when he saw Max approaching, something shifted. There was hope in those eyes, something that had been missing in the boy's desperate gaze moments before. Max reached him just as the current pulled the boy a few inches closer to the edge. With a quick lunge, Max grabbed the child by the collar of his jacket, using his teeth to latch on, pulling him backward against the current. Max's strength was undeniable, but so was the force of the river. It was a battle of wills, Max against the raging current, the boy against his fear. Sarah, too, held her breath as Max fought against the water. She could see him straining, his body working furiously to keep both himself and the child safe. It was a test of everything Max had learned in his life: the strength of his body, the courage in his heart, and the loyalty to those who depended on him. Max didn't let go. His grip tightened on the boy as the river's current grew stronger, but he pulled the child to the shore with a force that only a true hero could muster. The boy, now safe in Max's paws, was pulled onto the riverbank by the park ranger and Sarah. Max, exhausted but still standing strong, collapsed beside them, his body trembling with fatigue. Sarah knelt down beside Max, her hand gently brushing his fur. "You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and love. Max looked up at her, his body exhausted, but his eyes clear. He had passed the test, not just for the boy, but for himself. He had proven that his bravery was not just instinct, it was who he was. The crowd that had gathered began to cheer, their faces full of admiration for the brave dog who had risked everything to save a life. But Max wasn't concerned with the applause. He was just a dog. And to him, the real reward was the life he had saved and the bond he had with Sarah. As the boy was led away to safety, Max remained by Sarah's side, still panting but content. Sarah looked at him, her heart swelling with pride. She had always known Max was special, but now she knew he was something far beyond that. He was a hero. Max's courage had been tested and had proven itself beyond measure. The greatest test had come, and with it, Max had not only passed, but had emerged as the hero Sarah knew he could be. The moments after Max's incredible rescue were still suspended in the air, as if time had slowed down to allow the gravity of the situation to settle. The boy, still shaking from fear but now safe in the arms of the park ranger, looked up at Max with awe in his wide eyes. For the first time, the boy's face relaxed, no longer gripped by panic but now filled with gratitude. And in that moment, Max, exhausted, shivering, and panting, was no longer just Sarah's dog. He had become the town's hero, the symbol of bravery and selflessness. Sarah crouched beside Max, her hands gently running through his wet fur. She spoke quietly, her voice trembling with emotion, as her gaze locked onto Max's tired eyes. "You saved him, Max. You saved him," Sarah whispered, barely able to believe what she had just witnessed. Max didn't respond, not in the way a human would, but in his eyes, Sarah saw a quiet pride. He knew what he had done, and he knew it wasn't just an act of instinct. This was something deeper. Max had pushed beyond his limits, beyond what anyone, including himself, had ever expected. The crowd that had gathered around the riverbank was slowly beginning to stir. Some were applauding, others were speaking in hushed tones, amazed by the sight they had just witnessed. Sarah could hear the whispers among the people. "Did you see that he dove straight into the water without hesitation? He's a hero, just like that. Unbelievable." Sarah smiled through her tears, knowing that these words, these praises, were not for her, but for Max. He was the one who had acted. He was the one who had made the choice to risk his life for a stranger, something most people would never even consider. As the paramedics arrived to check on the boy, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the significance of the moment. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a symbol of bravery. The kind of bravery that didn't wait for recognition. It didn't wait for applause or cheers. It acted in the face of danger, driven by a sense of duty and loyalty that few could understand. After the boy was checked and given the all clear, Sarah walked Max slowly back to the car. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over everything. But even the beauty of the evening couldn't distract Sarah from the gravity of what had just occurred. Max had proved something that day, not just to the people who had watched, but to himself as well. As they approached the car, a man in a suit approached Sarah. He had been part of the crowd, but now, he seemed to be walking toward her with a different purpose. He introduced himself as David, the director of a local animal rescue organization, his eyes filled with admiration. "I just wanted to say that I've been involved in animal rescues for many years," David said, his voice sincere. "But what I saw today was extraordinary. Max saved that boy's life. He's a true hero, and I think he deserves recognition for that bravery." Sarah looked at Max, who, though tired, was still walking by her side. His demeanor was humble, as always. He didn't care about accolades or awards. He just wanted to be with her, to be part of their little world. "Thank you," Sarah replied, a lump in her throat. "But I think Max already knows he did the right thing. He doesn't need recognition. I don't think he even cares about that." David smiled warmly. That's exactly what makes his actions so remarkable. His bravery was driven by something pure. But there are people out there who need to know about this. They need to see what dogs like Max can do. I think the world could use more examples like him. Sarah nodded, thinking of the impact this could have on others. Max's actions had already inspired everyone around him that day. But perhaps there was more to be done. Perhaps Max's story could teach people to act when it matters, to rise above the ordinary and show what true courage is. David continued, "We would love to feature Max's story in our upcoming campaign. We want to raise awareness about animal heroism, and I can't think of anyone more fitting than Max. Would you be willing to work with us on this?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, looking down at Max, who had now stopped walking and was looking up at her, his gaze full of trust. "Of course," she said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "Max deserves it. If his story can help others, then I think it's the right thing to do." That night, after everything had settled down and Max was resting at home, Sarah sat quietly by the window, looking out at the stars. The events of the day felt like a whirlwind. In the quiet of their home, everything was still. Max lay on his bed, snuggled in, his tail occasionally wagging as he drifted in and out of sleep. Sarah thought about how much had changed in such a short time. Max had gone from being a beloved pet to a symbol of courage. His bravery had not only saved a life, but had also changed the way others viewed him and the way she viewed him. To her, Max was already more than a hero. He was a reflection of the unconditional love and loyalty that all animals give, without question, and the kind of courage that few humans could ever hope to match. The next morning, news outlets picked up the story. Max's heroism spread like wildfire, not just across the town, but to neighboring cities. People began to share his story on social media, using the hashtag #MaxTheHero. Sarah received messages from people all over the world, praising Max for his bravery and thanking him for showing them what it meant to be truly courageous. But it wasn't the recognition or praise that mattered to Sarah. What mattered was the profound change Max had gone through, from a playful, everyday dog to a beacon of hope and bravery. The story wasn't just about the rescue. It was about the ripple effect of that moment, the way it had touched so many lives. Later that week, Sarah took Max to the animal shelter for his first official recognition ceremony. The shelter, which had been operating for years, had planned a special event to honor Max's actions. There, surrounded by fellow dogs, volunteers, and local media, Max was presented with a plaque, a tribute to his bravery and to the incredible bond between animals and humans. Max didn't understand the significance of the plaque. He didn't need to. What mattered most to him was that Sarah was by his side. As long as he was with her, he had everything he needed. In the days following Max's heroic rescue of Daisy, the excitement around his bravery slowly settled, but the ripple effects of his actions continued to unfold. The news stories, the interviews, the admiration from those who had witnessed the rescue, it was all overwhelming. Yet Max remained the same dog he had always been. His loyalty, his playful nature, and his quiet confidence were unshaken by the sudden fame that had come his way. For Sarah, the days after the rescue felt like a gentle tide of reflection. Max had become a hero in the eyes of many, but to her, he had always been special. What had once been an ordinary afternoon at the park had turned into a defining moment that would change their lives forever. And as much as she loved the attention Max was receiving, she also knew that for him, it was never about recognition. He had simply done what needed to be done. One evening, as Sarah sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset and listening to the rustling of the leaves in the breeze, she felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. Max was curled up beside her, his head resting on his paws as he dozed in the warmth of the fading sun. Daisy, the dog Max had saved, was playing nearby, her energy restored. The two dogs, once strangers, now shared an unspoken bond, one forged in the life-and-death struggle they had faced together. Max's bravery had not only saved Daisy's life, but had also brought Sarah a new perspective on what truly mattered. It wasn't the awards, the recognition, or the accolades that meant the most. It was the quiet moments of togetherness, the unspoken bond between her and Max, the joy of seeing him healthy and happy, and the knowledge that his heroism had made a real difference. As the days passed, Max's story became more than just a local legend. People from all over the world had heard about the courageous dog who had saved another from drowning. His story had gone viral, inspiring countless others to act with courage, to step up when it mattered most. The animal shelter where Max had been honored started receiving more donations, and there were calls for more initiatives to recognize animal heroism. Sarah knew that Max had become a symbol, not just of bravery, but of the power of love, loyalty, and selflessness. But despite all the attention, Max was content with his life. He no longer needed to prove anything. He had already done something extraordinary, and he had done it simply because it was the right thing to do. Max had learned that true heroism was not about seeking recognition or fame, but about the quiet acts of kindness and courage that make a difference in the world. One afternoon, Sarah took Max for a walk through the park where it all began. The same park where Max had first noticed Daisy by the water's edge. The same park where Max had made the life-altering decision to dive into the lake to save her. It felt like a full-circle moment, and Sarah couldn't help but feel grateful for everything that had happened. As they walked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing within her as well. Max had shown her what it meant to be brave, to act selflessly in the face of danger, and to put others' needs before your own. And while Sarah had always been a compassionate person, Max had taken her understanding of bravery to a new level. She had seen firsthand the incredible bond between humans and animals, how they could come together in moments of crisis to show the true meaning of love and loyalty. It was then that Sarah realized that her life with Max, their bond, and their journey together was far from over. It had only just begun. There was so much more to do, so many more ways to help, to inspire, and to give back. Max had opened her eyes to a new world, one where the act of giving, of caring for others, was the greatest reward. Max's heroism, though now celebrated by many, had never been about the accolades. It had always been about love. It was the love between Sarah and Max that had propelled him to save Daisy, and it was the same love that would guide them both through whatever came next. Max had taught her that true courage wasn't about how big the task was, but about the willingness to step forward when the need was greatest. As they sat together on the porch, Sarah leaned down and kissed the top of Max's head. He lifted his eyes to meet hers, his tail wagging slowly, and she smiled. In that moment, Sarah understood that the quiet peace they shared was everything she needed. No fame, no recognition could replace the bond they had. It was the simplest, most beautiful thing. The sun had long since set, leaving behind a soft, purple glow in the sky. The stars were beginning to twinkle above them, and Sarah could feel the weight of the day lift away. There was a sense of calm that had settled in her heart, a sense of fulfillment that only Max's unwavering companionship could provide. 1 year later, Max and Daisy were inseparable. Max had become a local hero, but to Sarah, he was still just the dog who had saved another. He was her friend, her protector, and her family. Together, they continued to inspire others, working with animal shelters to promote rescue efforts and encourage people to adopt and care for animals in need. The bond Max shared with Sarah had grown stronger over the months, and Max had even become a beloved figure at the shelter where he volunteered his time. Sarah had learned that Max's bravery was not just about the rescue, it was about everything that followed. It was about the love and companionship that had come out of tragedy, and the way Max had taught her what it truly meant to be selfless. In the quiet moments they shared together, Max had given Sarah something priceless, the realization that life's most meaningful moments aren't always the ones that make the headlines. Sometimes, the most heroic acts are the ones that happen in the small, everyday moments. And as Max curled up beside her each night, Sarah knew that their journey together was just beginning. A year had passed since the day Max had risked his life to save Daisy, and in that time, both dogs had not only healed but thrived. Max's bravery had left a lasting impact, and Sarah couldn't help but marvel at how much their lives had changed since that fateful afternoon. What started as a simple, ordinary walk in the park had become the turning point for both Max and Sarah, opening doors they never thought possible. Max, once just an exuberant, playful dog, had become a local hero, his story shared far and wide. The shelter where Sarah worked had seen a surge in donations, and the story of Max's courage had led to greater public interest in animal rescue efforts. People who once saw dogs as mere companions were now looking at them with a new level of respect and admiration. Max had unknowingly opened the eyes of the public to the incredible bravery and loyalty that animals possess. But amidst all the recognition, the awards, and the media coverage, Max remained unchanged. He was the same loyal, loving dog who had saved a life not because of the applause or accolades, but simply because he cared. Sarah smiled every time she looked at him, reminded that true heroism doesn't seek fame, it simply acts when needed. It was a quiet evening when Sarah and Max sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues of orange and pink. Daisy, who had fully recovered and now lived with them, played in the yard, her movements light and carefree. The peace of the moment, the simplicity of their life together, filled Sarah with a contentment she had never known before. Max, who had once been rejected by others and even underestimated, was now a symbol of courage and strength. But to Sarah, he was so much more. He was her family, her constant companion, the one who had shown her the true meaning of bravery. The quiet moments they shared, those simple acts of companionship, were the ones that mattered the most. As the days passed, Sarah continued to work with her foundation, helping other animals in need. Max had become the face of the organization, not because of his fame, but because he embodied the values they stood for: loyalty, courage, and love. Max had shown Sarah that it wasn't the big moments that defined a life, but the small, everyday acts of kindness and bravery. One day, Sarah received a letter in the mail from a young boy named Jack, who had been inspired by Max's story. Jack wrote about how, after hearing about Max's bravery, he had decided to volunteer at the local animal shelter. The letter was filled with gratitude, and Jack shared how he now dreamed of becoming a veterinarian to help animals in need. Reading the letter, Sarah's heart swelled with pride. She knew that Max's heroism had inspired not only the community around them, but also young people like Jack, who would go on to make a difference in the world. It wasn't just Max's actions that mattered. It was the ripple effect that they had created. By saving Daisy, Max had changed lives in ways that could never have been predicted. A year had passed since that day by the lake, and while life had returned to a quiet normalcy for Max and Sarah, their journey was far from over. There were still lives to be changed, still many animals in need of rescue, and still many hearts to inspire. Max had shown Sarah what true heroism meant, not in the form of grand gestures or public recognition, but in the quiet, everyday acts of love and loyalty. He had taught her that courage could come from anyone, even from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most profound acts of bravery happen when no one is watching. As the sun set that evening, Sarah looked down at Max, who was curled up beside her, his eyes half closed in contentment. She knew, without a doubt, that their journey together was just beginning. Max had already given her so much more than she could ever repay. But she knew that, together, they would continue to make a difference, one life at a time. 1 year later, Max's story continued to inspire countless others. He was featured in animal heroism campaigns, and the foundation Sarah had started in his honor was now a thriving organization that provided rescue services for animals across the country. Max had become a symbol of hope, not just for animals, but for people too. His bravery had shown the world what was possible when we stepped up for others, and how a single act of kindness could change the course of someone's life. Max and Daisy, now inseparable, continued to live peacefully with Sarah, enjoying their days filled with love, play, and adventure. They had each other, and in that simple fact, Sarah found all the meaning she needed. Sarah's own life had changed as well. She was now a leading advocate for animal rights, using her platform to bring awareness to the importance of rescue and rehabilitation. And while the fame that had come with Max's story had opened many doors for her, she knew that her true purpose was helping those who couldn't help themselves, whether they had 2 legs or 4. Max, Daisy, and Sarah were a family, bound not by blood, but by a shared commitment to making the world a better place, every day. Max taught Sarah that true bravery wasn't about recognition, but about doing what needed to be done without expecting anything in return. His courage, loyalty, and love had changed their lives forever, and Sarah was determined to honor that by continuing the work they had started together. As the years passed, the memory of Max's heroic rescue became a part of the fabric of the community they lived in. People still talked about the dog who had saved a life without hesitation, the dog whose bravery had inspired a movement of kindness and compassion. But for Sarah, Max's legacy would always be more than just a story. It would be a reminder of the unspoken bond that existed between them, a bond that could never be broken. Max's bravery, his quiet heroism, had left an indelible mark on the world, and that mark would continue to inspire future generations. And as Sarah looked at him, resting peacefully by her side, she knew that they had created something extraordinary together, a legacy of love, loyalty, and the power of a single act of courage. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.